It is Friday, October the 3rd, 2025. I'm Heath Lambert, and the biggest story of the week is the tragedy in Michigan.
We've got new video. The Grand Blanc Township police said there was an active shooter at the Church of Latter-day Saints there.
Henry Ford Hospital, of course, confirming to us it's caring for some of the victims. In a statement writing just a short time ago, our hearts go out to our patients, their families, and the community, including the people worshiping.
During this incident, what we know right now is that a 40-year-old suspect from Burton, he's a male, he drove his vehicle through the front doors of the church. He then exited his vehicle, firing several rounds at individuals within the church.
On Sunday, September 28th, in Grand Blanc Township, Michigan, disaster struck a Mormon congregation gathered for worship. As I record these words, we know the what. The attack began when a man intentionally drove his truck into the building, began shooting the worshipers, and set the building on fire. At these early days, as I record the biggest story of the week, a few days earlier than normal, we know that 4 innocent people were murdered, 8 were seriously injured, and the assailant himself was killed by police. All Christians should pray for the recovery of those injured and for the grieving families to be comforted as they face unimaginable loss. Also, as I record these words, we know the who. Authorities have identified a former Marine, the man they killed on the scene, as the lone suspect in the case. What we do not know right now is the why. Investigators are scouring this man's life for information about why he engaged in such a wicked and deadly attack. News outlets are filling their reports on this story with questions about why this man would behave in the evil way he did. That information is trickling in, and more will become clear in the days and weeks ahead. On the biggest story of the week, I want to focus on the crucial nature of the question of why. When we know what happened and we know who did it, why is it so important to figure out why? First, we must say that the question of why is truly important. Our experience tells us this. Whenever we experience tragedy, it takes no strategy or planning to ask why. Why is the question that naturally springs from our heart. We also know that the question of why is important because of the teaching of Scripture. The question why is asked hundreds of times throughout the Bible. Sometimes the question comes from people to other people, and sometimes it comes from people to God. Many times in Scripture, it's a question posed from God to people. Most of the time, the question arises in the aftermath of trouble. The people asking it often know what happened, but they want more information. They want to know why. And the question is, well, why? The truth is that there are several really important responses to this question, but on the biggest story of the week, let me emphasize just one. The question of why points to the issue of motivation. When we ask the crucial question why, it reveals our interest in the causation behind behavior. The reason moral creatures like God and people are interested in why is because we know without needing to be persuaded that our lives matter and therefore our decisions have meaning. We all know that we must understand this meaning in order to make sense of all the things that happen to us. But the need for clarity about meaning feels especially urgent in the midst of tragedy. Without understanding the meaning, the why, behind wicked actions like what took place in Michigan this week, we really can't know how to move forward seeking justice and finding peace. The horrifying nature of the tragedy in Michigan has to do with the terrible loss of life. In order to have moral clarity about the loss of human life, it's crucial to know the why behind the loss of life. Consider 4 different contexts for the loss of human life in Scripture. Exodus 20:13 says, "You shall not murder." One context for the loss of human life is when innocent life is extinguished. This is sinful and wrong, but is only one context for the end of life. Another example is found in Numbers 35:11. You shall select cities to be cities of refuge for you, that the manslayer who kills any person without intent may flee. Here, we have the category of manslaughter created for people who end innocent life but do so unintentionally. In Exodus 22:2, the Bible creates the category of self-defense. If a thief is found breaking in and is struck so that he dies, there shall be no blood guilt. In this context, when a person ends the life of someone seeking to harm them, They are innocent of the blood of the person. Still another category is capital punishment, which comes when a competent governing authority punishes the life of a murderer by ending that person's life. Genesis 9:6 says, "Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed, for God made him in his own image." That is 4 different contexts for the ending of human life. In each example, the life of a human being comes to an end, but the guilt or innocence of the person ending that life is determined by their intention. As it relates to the issue of the ending of human life, we cannot understand how to justly proceed without understanding the nature of the motivation behind ending the life. We can't move forward without understanding causation. That means it is a moral imperative to ask why. When we ask why about the tragedy in Michigan, it underlines our need for more information about the motives of the assailant. We should pray that this information will be forthcoming and will provide some comfort to grieving families whose hearts feel the weight of the question of why beyond the ability of most of us to imagine. Of course, when and if those answers do come, it will only bring a measure of comfort. That's because there is no answer to the question of why that will ever justify the murder of these innocents on the part of that wicked man. Real help that truly matters and really lasts is going to have to come from a better place. And it comes in the answer to the question posed by Jesus Christ. In Matthew 27:46, as Jesus gave up his life on the cross, he asked why, saying, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Jesus did not ask that question because he did not know the answer. He asked it because he was quoting scripture, and Psalm 22 that he was repeating was written in the form of a question. That psalm identifies Jesus as the anointed one sent from God who would be pierced on the cross for sinners. Jesus articulated his understanding of the why behind his death when he said in Mark chapter 10, verse 45, "Even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." The why behind the death of Jesus was to pay the sin debt for all who would believe in him. As we await his return, we will experience many griefs and will ask why countless times. We will get the answer in some tragedies, and in others, unfortunately, we will not. But if we can understand and believe in the why behind the death of Jesus, we can have hope and peace in the painful times when the answers aren't so clear. We should all pray for the victims and their families to have the kind of peace in Jesus in the aftermath of the tragedy in Michigan. That is the biggest story of the week. I can't wait to see you next Friday when we examine next week's biggest headline.